What is up, everyone? Welcome back for episode 3 of the Content Creator Showdown. I'm your host, Jedi, and this is the show where I gather several influencers and content creators from the world of Eternal, put them head to head to find out which is the most entertaining, strategically sound, and introduce you to some brand new content. This season's format is Pauper, which means my contenders are only allowed to use commons in their deck, as you've seen in the previous shows. So this week we have a special matchup. We have one of the most renowned limited players and content creators in the form of Ben Glacier. He is a co-host of the Farming Eternal podcast, which is a limited focused podcast, and is also responsible for the 7-win deck list spreadsheet, which has tons of great statistics and information. So we'll find out what deck he's playing in a moment. His opponent is the one and only, the sealed deck doctor himself, E-Money. That's right, E-Money is another fellow limited player, so they're both somewhat at home playing with the majority of commons in their deck. E-Money is quite entertaining, as well as having his sidekick Sizzle Steam on the show from time to time, or the stream, so definitely check them both out. But without further ado, guys, let's head down to the deck tech room and find out what these guys are bringing to battle.
Hello, I'm Ben Glacier, one of the co-hosts of the Farming Eternal podcast. We're a draft-focused podcast with a very active community and some really cool projects, like a tournament of our own. We host every once in a while for draft content, and we have a very active Discord where we talk about all things draft. Today we're going to take a look at a Pauper deck list, and Pauper is actually pretty close to draft. You play a lot of commons in draft, or you play quite a few commons. So Jedi, EJ, is hosting a tournament in the Pauper format, and he was kind enough to invite us. So this is the deck I will be playing. I got the idea from Uric U's Praxis Warp deck that he won a recent Pauper tournament with. There's some cards in there that I didn't really like. Journeyman Armor and Manufacture. And I thought a lot of people would look to that deck list to get ideas for this format, so I wanted to be good in the mirror. One idea that I had for the mirror was Horn of Plenty. Horn of Plenty is very good in the mirror, because typically you're playing the same unit. Like, I play an Infused Guardian, you play an Infused Guardian, I play a Cannon Bearer, you play a Cannon Bearer. And when my Cannon Bearer has +1/+1 from Horn of Plenty, it's quite good for me, because my 6/7 Cannon Bearer just kills your 5/6 Cannon Bearer. That's good. So this Horn of Plenty was the card I was most excited to add to his Praxis list. I also talked with my podcast co-host, Adamaro, about this deck, and he had the idea of adding Primal for a second sight, and I think that was an extremely good idea. Second sight is basically the only card draw spell in the format, other than Warp is a kind of card draw mechanic. But Second Sight is a card draw mechanic. Now, on its face, Second Sight draws one card. You draw 2, and then you put 1 back on top. That's not really very good, and if you're looking for power, it can be extremely bad. Because, you don't draw power, you can put non-power back on top. That's not great. That's the reason why you see Strategize in Ranked, but there's no Strategize in Pauper. So this card actually works quite well with this deck, because something you can do is Second Sight and put a Warp card like Blink Wolf, Havoc's Familiar, Awakened Sentinel, or Cannon Bearer back on top of your deck. And then you can just play that the same turn, and that turns this into a 2-power Wisdom of the Elements, which is pretty excellent. So this is a lot of card advantage in this deck. It also works quite well with Echo cards. It's not amazing with Echo cards, but it's better than putting a non-Echo card back on top. And Teriak's Hatchling is another card that's extremely good in the mirror. It's good in the mirror, it's good against aggro, because in general what you have is a bunch of just chunky ground units, and when you get into these huge board stalls, what you can do is fly over the top, and this is a standard limited deck creation theory, and it has been working out pretty well for us so far. This card is also quite good with Horn of Plenty. So Tyriax Hatchling is replacing, you could think of it as replacing the manufacturers in the original decks, and Tyriax Hatchling is just a much, much better manufacturer. Also, there's Changey Stick. There was a lot of removal in the original deck. Torch, Conflagrate, and Purify. Didn't really love the Purifies. The silence doesn't really matter a lot in this format. Like, you could silence a big flyer, but there aren't any big flyers, really. You could silence a Infused Guardian to make it stop growing, but that's pretty limited in its effect. So, we were looking at Changey Stick. Now, Torch, Conflagrate, and Purify all do small amounts of damage. Changey Stick deals with large creatures as well, so I think this is a strict upgrade to Purify, and it's actually kind of in the same vein as Purify, because it is a transform effect. If you need a transform effect, it makes one of your huge creatures flying, which Purify cannot do, and it deals with big creatures, which Purify can't really do either. We're also playing in this deck 4 Seek Power for Amber Acolyte. I replaced the Talir's Favor Seek Power. I think that's kind of a side grade. The Talir's Favor can block, but we're just not playing enough Time Sigils to play a bunch of Talir's Favored. And Seek Power critically gets us our 1 Primal Sigil in the deck, which is very important for playing a splash of these 10 primal cards. It also fixes, like, it minorly fixes for our a couple of our double fire cards, which the Talir's Favor would not do. So those are the changes, I believe, from the original deck. I took out Manufacture basically for Tyriax Hatchling. I took out the Journeyman Armor for maybe Second Sight. I would say I switched Journeyman Armor for Second Sight. I switched Talir's Favor for Seek Power, and I put in some Horns and Changey Stick for the Purifies. And then the power is just pretty basic. You play all the dual lands you can play. We're not playing Genev Token just because I think the Waystones are better, but that's something you could play if you wanted to get some more time sources in here. You could also play Spellmaker, but didn't choose to do that.
Hey everybody, welcome. This is Eric with the Eric Experience. Maybe I shouldn't be drinking the drink right now. Thank you, Jedi, for setting this up for us. This is part of the Creator Showdown. I am Eric Franklin, also known as One Punch on Eternal, and E Moneybags in Twitch. I stream weeknights now, Eternal and Magic. And my deck I chose for the showdown is Assault on Cake Mountain. Let's get to it. Alright, so first thing I did was just pour through the all the commons, and was thinking, alright, with Torch available, Conflagrate, Streets of Flame, Purify, I thought being able to go above a 3-butt would be important, and so I kind of built accordingly to that. And then I also figured out it's gonna be hard to gain card advantage, so I thought just go play bigger creatures than the opponent, or try to at least. And so that's what the Wormstone, Power Breach, Guardian, Behemoth, and Sentinel are all about. And then for the 4-butts, Arachnodon and Amanera, just to try and negate their Torches conflagrates, purifies streets. And then the Death Strike is a nod to warp also. So I just tried to push in as many warp cards as I could, while also going a little bit heavier on the curve here. And so I ended up choosing time as the second color. I figured most people are probably going to be in fire for torches, conflagrates, purifies, streets. Some combination of those. They're just efficient burn spells. And so I wanted to try and get above those. And that's why I used time here. And then once I realized I can get quite a few spells in here, and Wormstone is a pretty awesome thing to do on turn 4. Not a whole lot that I'm doing on turn 4, and I can curve right into them with the Devotees. So that kind of locked in Wormstone for me. That's about it. And then Oni Ronin just trying to get those Warcry triggers, since I'm packing a bunch of burn to push them through. So that is the deck in a nutshell. Assault on Cake Mountain. You've seen it here first. Hopefully I can get some wins with this bad dude. Alright, take it easy, everybody. Bye.
Alright guys, for game 1, E-Money decides to keep a hand of Time Sigil, Fire Sigil, Seek Power, Yeti Pioneer, Wormstone, and Double Devotee of the Sands. Ben Glacier, who's on the play for game 1, decides to keep a Time Sigil, Granite Waystone, Double Cannon Bearer, Amber Acolyte, Infused Guardian, and a Second Sight. Alright, let's see how these gentlemen do battle. Ben Glacier starts us off by pledging the Infused Guardian to give him a time power and passes it over to E-Money. E-Money plays a Time Sigil of himself and plays a Seek Power, looking for another Fire Sigil. Passing it back to Ben Glacier. He plays his Time Sigil and sends it over to E-Money. E-Money follows it up with a Fire Sigil, playing a Devotee shifted to make sure it is out of burn range and essentially catapulting his power from 2 to 4 next turn with the Wormstone in hand, or potential 2/2 drops. Ben Glacier plays his third power, followed up by an Amber Acolyte, going to get his fourth power, but first Primal Sigil, thus giving him all 3 colors of fixing. E-Money decides to go with the ramp plan and plays a power as well as a Wormstone, doing not much for the turn and sending it back to Ben Glacier. Ben Glacier plays their 4th power, they attack with the Acolyte, getting in for 2, and decides to simply just pass the turn, not really having much to do. E-Money plays their 5th power, and with a little bit of debate, decides to go ahead and break the Wormstone with the Seek Power, going to find their 6th power, and playing a Devotee, also shifted, keeping it out of harm's way, and dumping some more onto the board with the 3/2 Yeti Pioneer. Quite a board state for E-Money, sending it back to Ben Glacier. Ben Glacier is debating a little bit about what to do at the end of his turn, considering he has the option of Second Sight as well as Torch. Deciding not to play either of those, they draw and play the Elysian Banner, giving a time and influence, followed up by the Sentinel 3/5 Endurance, and shipping it back over to E-Money, being strictly defensive. E-Money, after a little bit of debate, decides to go ahead and cast the Death Strike on the Worm, make it a 7/7 with Fight. Sends the Sentinel on their merry way to the Void, and follows it up by torching the Amber Acolyte, leaving the doorway free for the Pioneer and the Devotee to get in there for 4, taking Ben Glacier down to 21. E-Money has nothing to do with the additional power off the Yeti, and passes the turn. Once again, we see Ben Glacier play their 6th power, having full Genève online, well, just about, they're missing fire, and decides to go ahead and Second Sight, instead of playing a Canyon Bear here. Second Sight draws 2 sigils, and they decide to put the Cannon Bear on top. Surprisingly, they torch a devotee, probably assuming that eventually one of these big units will be able to block the 3-2 Yeti, since it does have Reckless. E-Money doesn't mind having an open board and swings in for 10, taking Ben Glacier down to 13. And then follows up by playing another shifted devotee. Figured the 1-3 is going to be hard pressed to get in there, so they'd rather have the Emergence unblockable ability. Ben Glacier follows up by warping the 3-5 Endurance Sentinel off the top of their deck, essentially drawing a card as well as the Cannon Bear. As expected, all 3 units jam, the Devotee having emerged unblockable and the Pioneer getting blocked by the 3-5 Sentinel. E-Money decides not to really get maximum value off of the Conflagrate, but instead use it while the getting's good, and 2-for-1ing himself, taking out the Sentinel, getting in for 7 again with the Worm, bringing Ben Glacier down to 5. Ben Glacier has 7 power, including a banner and time in hand, 2 Cannon Bears, and a Vrax Familiar. They go ahead and decide to put down some meaty unit and drop the Cannon Bear, doing 1 to E-Money's face and passing it back. E-Money attacks with the 7-7. Ben Glacier has no choice but to chump block, and E-Money is satisfied with that, only drawing sigils and passing it back to Ben Glacier. Ben Glacier has the opportunity to finally play 2 units in 1 turn should they want to, so they start off with Amber Acolyte, drawing a sigil, and then playing Cannon Bear once again, just doing 1 damage to E-Money's face, bringing him down to 21 to 5. E-Money decides, I smell blood in the water, I am going to attack with everything, and I have plenty of power, so sends in both Devotees and the Worm, taking out the Cannon Bear and the Devotee, but dying in the process, so 2-for-1ing in E-Money's favor, and E-Money follows up with the 4-4 Roctodon. Ben Glacier's at 3, and his follow-up play is Infused Guardian, taking it up to 5, and playing the 1-2 Avirax Familiar. Sadly, 1-Money starts to dry up a little bit on his draws and simply draws a Devotee. Not really where you want to see your ramp cards. This is late in the game, but they do what they do. E-Money decides it's not a profitable attack and holds back. Ben Glacier simply drew a power, which is still fine considering it pumps the Infused Guardian. E-Money sort of lucked out by drawing the 3 damage Silence spell from Praxis. Forgive me, it is escaping me at the moment. They decide to take out the Familiar and attack for everything, taking Ben down to 1. With 2, potentially 3 attackers on the board, Ben Glacier has to figure out really what they're going to do here. They drew an Amber Acolyte, immediately playing it, giving him 2 blockers and pumping the Infused Guardian yet again. Infused Guardian is so good in the late game as they continue to get bigger. But sadly, off the top, E-Money draws the Conflagrate that will get rid of both the Amber Acolyte and bring the Infused Guardian down to 4, bring him Ben Glacier to have only 1 blocker. 1 gets through, and that locks up the game 1 for E-Money, 1-0. Alright, for game 2, E-Money is on the draw and decides to keep a hand of Fire Sigil, Time Sigil, Infused Guardian, Purify, Wormstone, Death Strike, and a Watchful Almanara. Ben Glacier, having lost last game, is on the play yet again, and he decides to keep a hand of Amber Waystone, Fire Sigil, Time Sigil, another Infused Guardian, and not 1, not 2, but 3 Avirax Familiars. Will this be enough to help him pull a win off this time? Let's head down to the match and find out. Alrighty, for starters, Ben decides to play a Time Sigil and passing their turn, keeping the Infused Guardian in their hand, which I think is a smart play. E-Money has the same decision that Ben Glacier had in game 1 and came to the same outcome where they rather have 3 power and went ahead and pledged the Guardian. Ben Glacier plays a power and passes the turn, drawing a second Guardian. E-Money, similar situation when it goes ahead and plays their second power, passes it back. Ben Glacier plays their third power depleted and ships it back. Finally, someone's on the board with E-Money playing Watchful Monero, but still not drawing a 4th power. Ben Glacier plays a power, plays a Familiar, and bumps them up to 5. E-Money draws a Wormstone. Now they're stuck with just a Death Strike, a Purify, and a Conflagrate, and another Death Strike being the plays. So they decide to go ahead and conflagrate the familiar, getting the scout ability off of the Watchful Monera, and of course, just as they planned it out, seize power on top, so they get him for 2, and E-Money passes it back to Ben. Ben is only able to play a power pre-combat and play the Infused Guardian for 4. E-Money draws the fire sigil they knew was coming, and once again they're stuck trying to figure out what to do with their choked power, considering that their hand is somewhat full of gas and they're only really able to play one thing a turn. So after some debate, he decides he wants to get the 7/7 on the board, plays the Wormstone, and passes it back to Ben. Ben plays a second Infused Guardian, then plays their power, bumping it up to 2 5/5s with Endurance, and swings at the one that is able to attack. E-Money decides not to block and drops down to 20. E-Money draws an amber coin, so they are unable to attack, seeing 10/10 worth of endurance power on the other side of the board. And so, but he decides to be brave and attack. Ben feels like his life is a good cushion and a resource, and decides just to take the 2. So E-Money manages to sneak in there with 2 damage, sadly not being able to combo off with a Purify to take out one of the Guardians. He plays the coin, triggering for the 1/1 Wisp with the Onslaught trigger, and debates on whether they want to play the Purify or not on the Infused Guardian, and decides, hey, why not? Let's at least stop it from growing before it gets out of hand from our 1/1 or a 7/7 Worm. You see a Seek Power on top, and E-Money keeps it on top because I'm assuming they want to go Wormstone and break it, immediately getting their 6th power. But Ben Glacier with the top deck draws another Infused Guardian, plays it, and then follows it up with a power, having a 5/5 endurance, a 6/6 endurance, and a 5/5 silenced. He attacks with both, and E-Money decides to chump block with the 1/1 Wisp. As planned, they play the Wormstone, play the Seek Power, going to look for their 6 power, breaking it, creating another worm, worm, and in a gutsy play decides to attack. Ben Glacier feels like he is okay with the racing situation and doesn't block, going down to 16. So 16 life for Glacier, 15 life for E-Money, and they have a 2/4 Monera on the watch. Once again, Ben Glacier draws power, pumps up all his guys, and swings. Watchful Monera chump blocks a 7/7, 11 damage going through, taking E-Money down to 4. Wow, has the game changed, or the difference from game 1 to game 2? Now E-Money is on the defense and Ben Glacier is the aggressor. E-Money draws power, 2 7/7s on the board, but he's only at 4 life. He's going to play his Infused Guardian. He's going to play power, bumping it up to a 5/5. Will this be enough? It's not looking good. At the very least, the flying units will get in, taking him down to 2. Ben decides, hey, I don't need the trade. I'm in a good spot, and attacks for 2, as we thought, in the air, with E-Money having nothing to do, and then follows up by playing a 2 Children Terriaxes. Either way, 2/1 flyers, and so with an overwhelming air force and drawing a sigil, E-Money calls it in, giving the game to Ben Glacier, 1/1 all. Alright, for game 3, Ben Glacier decides to keep a hand of Skycrag Banner, Primal Sigil, Granite Waystone, Seek Power, Blink Wolf, Awakened Sentinel, and an Infused Guardian. E-Money is on the play again this game finally, and he will be keeping a hand of Time Sigil, Fire Sigil, Blink Wolf, Oni Ronin, Death Strike, and a pair of Awakened Sentinels. Who's going to emerge victorious in this match? Let's find out. E-Money starts us off by playing a Fire Sigil followed up by an Oni Ronin, and I couldn't imagine a better turn 1 for a Praxis player. Ben Glacier plays the banner, having nothing else to do, and passes it back. E-Money follows up with second power and attacks with the Oni Ronin, followed up by the Blink Wolf. They really don't want to see a third power here. Ben Glacier plays their second power, follows up with the Blink Wolf of their own, and passes back with the Blink Wolf on defense. E-Money draws that third power, and they have to decide if they want to Death Strike Blink Wolf versus Blink Wolf, and they do. Super aggressive play, but I guess he figures that he's not going to have, he'd rather do an Arachnodon and Awakened Sentinels on 4 and 5, so why not? And this gets an additional Warcry trigger. Passes it back. Ben Glacier has a third power, has a familiar on top, but decides to seek power instead, looking for their time that they needed, and leaves up Second Sight. E-Money draws a Seek Power and attacks for 2, so kind of stumbles a little bit on power, but at least technically I guess they didn't miss it, just a slight hit to their tempo, which is a bummer considering that Ben had a similar play. Ben doesn't use his Second Sight and rather just draw the familiar, playing the Acolyte, drawing their 5th power and playing it, so they're at 4 power now, and passing it back to E-Money. E-Money decides, alright, I'm not going to trade a Conflagrate for an Acolyte, and decides to just send in the Oni Runny, cashing that in, and then playing the 4-4, upgrading the unit, and keeping their tempo. Now it's up to Ben Glacier to make a play, and they play their 5th power, so kind of stumbling a little bit earlier on tempo to even out now, and decide to play the Infused Guardian over the Awakened Sentinel. One punch, or E-Money swings in, and to my surprise, Ben Glacier decides he's okay with the trade, thinking that the 3-5 Awakened Sentinel will help bridge the gap. E-Money follows up by playing his Awakened Sentinel and passes it back to Ben. Ben then plays their Awakened Sentinel, and block. Aggressive block here from Ben Glacier, and of course E-Money decides to cash it in using the Conflagrate, but then it's sent back with a torch, so both players 2 for 2 each other, and sadly here E-Money decides to take the hit and isn't able to deploy their other Sentinel. Ben Glacier takes a Canyon Bear off the top, which he quickly plays, dealing 1 damage to E-Money, taking him down to 24, and passes it. E-Money plays the Awakened Sentinel, has nothing else going on, and passes it back. Of course, Ben Glacier attacks. E-Money blocks, sacrificing the Awakened Sentinel, and before Second Sight could resolve, E-Money decides to torch the Canyon Bear, getting it off the board, 2 for 1ing himself, and staying with an empty hand. Ben Glacier has a hand of 4 and plays the Ivrax Familiar off the top. E-Money draws a torch, which in most cases would be a great card, except when you're top decking and your opponent drops an Infused Guardian. Plays a power, making it a 5-5 endurance, and seeks power to make sure he can trigger it next turn as well. This is not looking good for E-Money. He's got to get something good off the top. Ben Glacier attacks for 1, going down to 23, and passes it. Sadly, E-Money draws a time sigil, which is not what he's looking for, and Ben Glacier draws an Echo T-Rex Hatchling, so he gets 2 2-1 flyers. He first attacks for 6 with the Infused Guardian and the Familiar, taking E-Money down to 17, and then follows it up by playing the 2 Familiars, the 2 Hatchlings. So now with a full board, he passes back. E-Money is already starting to feel it, as you can see from the expression of his face, and he decides he's seen enough, and he calls it, giving game, set, and match to Ben Glacier. Wow, what a match, guys. Talk about some steamrolling and momentum building. Those Sentinels did some work. I was really impressed how the Warp decks managed to draw so many additional cards, even having expensive units, but kudos to them. Look at Ben Glacier doing his thing, liking the Go 5 color, decided to push it in the 3 colors for this Popper Challenge. But the games were a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed them. Of course, Ben Glacier took the victory, so he's going to stay in the winner's bracket. And that's also going to move E-Money down to the not-so-winning bracket. Of course, once again, this is double elimination, so this is not the last we will be seeing of either opponent, as they will be battling out again in round 2. I will say this, stay tuned for next episode, as we will have someone else from the Farming Eternal podcast coming online to battle it out. Now, that being said, you can catch Ben Glacier on the Farming Eternal podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, where it be iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and all that good stuff. You can catch E-Money streaming live 3 days a week at twitch.tv/ I was about to say Jedi, but E-Money Bags. That's right, guys. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this content. Let me know if you got any feedback for me so I can continue to make the best shows out there for you guys. By all means, share, like, and tell your friends about this great game of Eternal that we have. Tune in to all the content creators you have seen here as they help spread the word about Eternal. And whether you like limited, constructed, comboing, or sealed, or forged, it doesn't matter. This game is fantastic. We all enjoy playing it. So, once again, I'm Jedi from the Eternal Journey podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for the following episodes. And until next time, as always, happy gaming.